various pillars that will contribute to a global success. We've spoken about how this is Bharat's time, India's time to really change the fast-paced, evolving landscape and how they can become a world-class global hub. We've spoken about challenges, opportunities. So we, in fact, will be now tying all that we've heard all through the day and also look at any other factors that we've missed. So essentially, we'll try and focus on the three pillars of global success, which means we'll delve far, far deeper into international transactions, compliance, and most importantly, risk mitigation, something that we want to listen a little longer as well. So we'll speak about complexities of cross-border transactions, currency exchange, invoicing, payment methods, just some of the talking points that we hope that this conversation will have a lot going for us. So ladies and gentlemen, let's go forward and let's talk about this next panel that will delve deeper into far more fascinating aspects of the GCC evolving landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, let's start welcoming our stellar panel. I'd like to begin by inviting Mr. Amit Dubey, Director, Airbnb Global Capabilities Center, to please join us on stage. I'd also like to invite on stage Anuja Bhargava, Head of GC Operations at Fidelity International, to also join us on stage. We also have on the panel Ashish Sachdeva, Senior Director Finance, Midland Credit, to join us on this panel. Also inviting Brejesh, Chalill, Executive Vice President at Axis Bank, to join us on the panel, and the moderator of this panel from Deloitte India, Jayant Saran, a partner at Deloitte India, who in fact will be steering this conversation. Good to have all of you. Jayant, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. Just a small one. I don't know if we're going to be able to delve very deep into any of the subjects, but with the time that we have. But we hope to do justice to the conversation that we've been entrusted with. So very quickly, we've talked a lot about India's position as a preferred destination for establishing GCCs, whether it's the operating climate, technology infrastructure, or available of skilled talent. Some of these have been discussed in previous sessions, but we're going to, as rightly said, try and summarize some of those. We will also try and highlight some of the risks, both generic and specific, that the GCCs face or need to navigate as they build out and expand their footprint in the country. Now, while we are all aware of some of these, let's see what else we can uncover through this session. So firstly, if I could just request each of you to have a quick intro about what is it that you do, just to build context.
Hi guys, my name is Brejesh. I had the treasury sales business at Axis. I've always been a markets person between ANZ, Standard Chartered, and now Axis. Excited to be here, Jayant. I think thank you ET also for having all of us. I've been listening to some of the GCC commentary, 1,500 active ones, going up to 2,500, double-digit growth. As a bank, we do work with quite a few GCCs, but it's good to see this is becoming one big solid pillar for growth for India as well. Cheers.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. Good afternoon. I'm Ashish Sachdeva. I'm Senior Director of Finance, working currently with MCM, Midland Credit Management. We are a back office of Encore Capital Group, who are into debt servicing industry in US. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anuja. I'm a part of Fidelity, currently heading their General Counsel Shared Services. When we say General Counsel, typically people start thinking of legal, but in Fidelity's parlance, General Counsel is what all you can think the second line does, risk, compliance, legal, obviously, tax as well. We just had a discussion on tax, so tax as well. So I'm heading that team currently. Thank you.
Awesome. My name is Amit Dubey. I currently work with Airbnb. Prior to that, I worked with American Express for almost a decade, and then Uber, and then here. Also, if somebody has not tried Airbnb, it's a great way to do vacations. So, just a brand pitch, right? So, yeah, I see some fans out there. Thanks.
And we also have people who can provide the credit for it. No, thank you so much.
And if you have money left, then we have Fidelity Investments.
And when you've collected enough debt, then there's someone to buy that out from you. Yeah, sure. Okay. Fantastic. So as you can see, we've got a fairly diverse set of people on stage here. Lots to talk about. What we're going to try and do is sort of uncover this bit by bit. So let's start with a larger macro view. Now, considering the fact that most GCCs support multiple international businesses, emanating from different countries, there is naturally, the entire element of financial management. What is the right vehicle to set up? What are the compliances in each of the home countries that you need to look out for? What are your local regulations? How do you do international invoicing? How do you deal with currency fluctuations? So basically the entire gamut of international transactions. So if I could just, and I'm keeping taxation out of this because you've just heard that before in the session before this. So, we'll just go around the table. Brejesh, we'll start with you.
Sure, I think at least from a GCC perspective, the one reason why we get called is usually obviously currency fluctuation. And I think the GCC business is in many ways centered around it because it's a cost plus model, and dollar rupee fluctuations can of course impact a lot of it. So yeah, and I think we've seen the last 3-4 years of decent stability, but we've had a change in governor and we've had Donald Trump coming in. So I expect a lot of volatility and a lot of more calls. So yeah, currency risk is something that I think most GCC should kind of look at very seriously.
Fantastic.
As I said, so for us, the biggest risk is CFPB, which is a credit bureau in US. Our industry is heavily regulated, and we have to follow strict rules and guidance on how do we approach a consumer who has defaulted on a credit card payments. And simple example is if we call up someone and who owes money to us, and if he says he doesn't, we should not be calling him, we can't call them, then we have to approach via legal channels. And there are heavy penalties, and they are so big that entire year's margin can go in one single shot. So that's where we are. So our biggest risk is regulatory.
Fantastic. Anuja, for you, you've got Japan to the US and a whole bunch of other countries there.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And since as in I come from a financial background, most of these countries are also regulated by a regulator. Like in India, we have SEBI. Each country has their own regulator. So it's obviously very difficult to understand what regulations are there across the globe. Sitting here in India, it's very difficult to even interpret sometimes because the main policy may have not been written in English, and then the translation, you typically lose the final print for it. So as in combining with technology, we've had a lot of sessions on technology earlier. They're very good tech tools actually, which help you scan what's happening in the market, keep you updated, and then obviously as in help you interpret them as well. Obviously, GenAI is the new kid in the block, which everybody wants to friend on. So that's also helping to interpret what the policy is and how you would comply to it. But only understanding the policy is not enough, as in that's the first step. But once you've understood the policy, also implementation of it and then making sure that we are complying to it is another big challenge. So for that, obviously, as in we need the right tools and infrastructure, we need the right people. We've had detailed discussions on this earlier, but and especially the HR discussion where we were saying that it's the people who do it. So you need to have those people who understand those regulations and then finally implement it. And thirdly, I would ring fence it by policy on adherence to the compliance of these policies. I mean, it's a very big and a tongue twister, but you need the policies for adhering to these policies as well. If you don't have that framework, it can just go loose and you will not be able to bind people to follow those policies or procedures which you have maintained to make sure that we are following the regulations.
So we'll keep talent out of it. We've got that as a conversation point as well. So Amit?
Yeah, for context, actually, for us, imagine we started in about 2008, where if actually as a host, you hosted someone, the founders would come to you and give a check. That's what was the journey. And today, we're present in 220 countries, and we're moving money across all these countries. We roughly moved about $75 billion last year. So the scale of Airbnb is massive, but also presents the complexity, because imagine moving money out of places such as Cuba. We're one of the only businesses who actually operate there, and their banking system is about 40 years behind the rest of the world. So it is a humongous challenge and risk, and I think one of the actually biggest success stories for us as a capability center from a value proposition was actually to help solve this complex problem or as a use case. And we've, right from product development to working with regulators and in each of these countries to figure out what do they need and how do we solve for it. For example, in GST, when we launched our business here in 2016, and even when GST was getting launched, we actually worked very proactively with the government to ensure that we are compliant from right get-go. And that has actually helped us unlock revenue and
so just to butt in,
as well.
you were talking about, moving money across countries, right? And that's another place where sometimes the regulations of the country play in, right? So obviously, India, Cuba, not so easy right now. And, there are stories about even Pepsi and Coke, which were there in the Soviet bloc earlier, who were actually moving money through the barter system, through actually cars versus Pepsi. So I'm saying, you have to solve for everything finally.
Yes, I mean, not just Coke and Pepsi. The story is that apparently the UN was using Hawala to pay salaries in Africa at the height of the conflict. So yeah, interesting anecdotes there. I think very often the entire element of how much understanding, the GCCs need to have of, global policies, like what you were talking about or what you're talking about, or, specifically, let's say in your case, I think it's often not broadly understood the depth of knowledge you need to have of, the various countries that you may be supporting from here. Now, there are various regulations, and we touched on some of the regulations. So some of them, of course, specific territorial, some of them are extraterritorial, regulations. You'll have bribery and corruption, which will sort of cut across, especially when you're dealing with countries which are possibly either sanctioned or on the verge of sanctions or close to the border. Many of you are from financial sector, and you have local financial regulators. You sort of alluded to that, and so did you. How do you, with the knowledge that is required for your local operations to have that, how do you prepare for that? We'll start with you. I think you had, you had touched on it, so I'm going to start with you, Ashish.
So basically, from a compliance standpoint, compliance and training is one of the major pillars that we have built in our GCC. So any new fresher who joins us, a new employee who joins us, who's supposed to be making calls to US consumers, they undergo a 3 to 4 months of a thorough training. There are legal talk-offs that they are trained on, the things that they need to be, telling the consumer before, the call actually, starts with them. And all these things gets recorded. So, even if the consumer, case is closed, we have to keep all the call recordings, all the documentations for six long years. And these state-wise, in US, law differs by each individual state. So you have to follow those protocols of each individual state before you can do that. And as I said, the penalties are very severe, and we get annually audited by the regulator there.
What about you, Anuja? In your ecosystem, also I would assume it will be similar, because again, the number of countries that you possibly support from here.
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, across, I think it's going to be similar for all of us. All of us actually here in the room, anti-bribery, corruption, or regulations pertaining to similar to those are very important. As you mentioned, training and having awareness around it is important. And I would also say the same thing which I said earlier, also having governance around it is also very important. Because if you see something happening and then not report it, not whistleblow it, then actually it will happen for the second time, and then the third time, and then the fourth time. So to stop it, you've got to nip it in the bud. So obviously we've got stringent policies around that, but we've also started using data for all the high-risk countries, etc. We started using data in terms of where is the money being spent, where is the money being moved, say for instance, where is our customer coming from, where is the customer getting the money from. So we've started using a lot of data to do more predictive analytics to predict where we could go wrong.
Yeah, I was just, building on some of the pointers that was shared. I was just thinking of some analogies to share. For example, you might think we're, of course, the primary business Airbnb isn't to help people travel, but I'm pretty sure not many people would know this, that even world's biggest insurance providers provide insurance in about 80 countries. Airbnb provides insurance in 220 countries. So dealing with that sort of, and insurance is a heavily regulated business. Of course, we are not the first party. We leverage so the insurance providers in that place. And then sort of making the money movement, et cetera, is also a huge complexity. What has been sort of, I would say, foundational to us that while it's a San Francisco-based, US-based company, but we started that as a sort of central thing, but then we've worked with each country by country, and then local laws and regulations to really go after and sort of build those relations and build those capabilities to solve for some of those risks that present themselves. I mean, we can't operate our business if we don't solve for it. So that's where I think, and that is something which, as a use case for us as a GCC, became I would say the first theme that we went after to create that center of excellence for the company here in India, and end to end, right from like product development to technology teams being here, to driving, help drive policy or operations, end to end being done from here, and that has proven to be a huge success for us.
No, super, because I think considering everyone else is from the financial services space, and yours is traditionally not seen as financial services, but just by sheer magnitude, I think it's incredible the kind of hoops you need to sort of jump there. Just continuing down that track, we, in all of your businesses, and and Brejesh, I guess for you also as you're advising clients, I think one of the elements would come up is the entire regulation around data privacy now, because that's again becoming both an enabler as well as a deterrent for some of the things that you may want to do, right? So, how are you dealing? While saying that, okay, we will have compliances and trainings is one thing, but how do you sort of put that into practice on a day-to-day basis? Because, like you said, in your case, you could have someone from California who will have a separate set of laws, a separate set of penalties. You could have. So how do you run the entire data protection story? Because that, for me, I think is one of the biggest issues for any work that you're going to do across borders, because it sort of varies by country.
Yeah, for us, it's a big issue because we have access to all the confidential data of all the consumers which we are interacting on day-to-day basis. So be it their social security numbers, their employment records, their addresses, phone numbers, their credit card spend, their bank account details. We have everything so far as our consumers are concerned, for which we are following up for those collection activities. And from that standpoint, we have a lot of guardrails. The entire database is secured in a particular database tool, and our IT team work round the clock to ensure that those, the data is secured enough. Apart from that, we have 24/7 operations here in India, and these employees have to come to office if they want to actually operate and call US consumers. So primarily, these are the things that we do.
Just to add on, as in you've covered a fair bit, we also have a cybersecurity week or a data privacy week that is to create more awareness. That's something which, you may have the policies, you may have the trainings, but people should understand that, because it's actually that's one of the leak points from where the data could go out. There's also a lot of debate which is there. I wouldn't say it's a settled debate, but a lot of a debate happening currently, not only in Fidelity, but in the industry around data privacy in hybrid working. There can be a lot of data privacy rules, etc., imposed in the office, but while you're working at home, you could be working from a cafe, you could be working from anywhere else. Your spouse could be in a competitor firm, and then you're working in the same house where your meetings, etc., are being overheard. So there's a lot of currently a debate, and obviously everybody has their views around it, around hybrid working and data privacy. Hope there is some more clarity and some more regulations around what we could work from a remote location and not. But definitely this is one thing which is currently in the way of GCCs managing data from India. The perception is still there that once the data is in India, it may leak out. So India doesn't hold that very strong data protection bills and data protection acts, etc., whereby we could say that, as in we're not strong as GDPR, let me put it that way.
Yeah, and to further build on this, actually, what I would say is that for anyone who's operated in a sort of a global setup, you would say that Europe is pioneer or probably leader in this space with GDPR, and now California with CCPA and then India with DPA. We are seeing, as we operate across the world, it is actually a very pertinent question because it is truly becoming a front and center debate topic across countries. And like you will see across in the news as well that more or less everybody is saying our country's data should stay in our country, and then specific laws around how to handle it, etc. And then you have the, I won't bore the team with this one, but like lots of discussion in AI, like AI as, another gentleman shared, like data is a big pillar of AI. So there is a ton of debate happening in that space. But what has been, I would say, I think very heartening from our side was, and I saw that Uber as well, if you operate in Europe, you can learn a lot from there and actually use that as a benchmark. And the good part is, because everybody else is catching up to Europe, if you already start with that benchmark, chances are, everybody else who comes and looks at your processes or systems or technology, they'll say, oh, you're already GDPR compliant, so that's probably a great place to start. So I would say that if one tip I could give or share, which has helped us, would be to use them as a benchmark, and instead of regulators coming to you and saying, you have to catch up, if you actually start with them as a benchmark, that's been a fairly successful strategy for us.
Actually, for us, Jayant, we actually have a very prudent regulator, and we are governed by RBI, and RBI has put out a new policy for data privacy and client confidentiality, and I think all the banks are gearing up for that. Unfortunately, like some of the other industries, we can't afford to go down. I mean, today there was a talk about Insta and Facebook, going down and some outage, but I'm saying it's people's money that we are kind of managing, right? And we just can't afford for that. And it's, like I said, it's good that as a central bank, all central banks, whether it's MAS for Singapore or RBI here, whenever they see any bank having, whether it's a local bank or an international bank, even a bank like DBS, which is, very well known as a digital leader, I would say, when they had some snags, MAS didn't spare them and MAS went after them, and same with RBI here. So I think it keeps us on our toes, and it keeps client money and all GCC customers' money safe.
No, fantastic. Because I mean, for me also, if I look at it, the entire premise of how this business or this entire space would operate is purely on the concept of data movement from one country to the other, right? So capabilities, etc., everything that we build, data still stays at the core of it. And a lot of it would be personal data, I would assume.
Jayant, actually, it's not only data movement. Now, there's also discussion on where is the data being processed or manipulated as well.
Yeah.
So if your data is being processed in a server where your jurisdiction is not allowing the data to be there, then it's a separate regulations to comply with and separate issues to be dealt with then.
No, absolutely. So, but data still stays at the core of it, and I think that's really a place where a lot of thought needs to go in. One of the parts, again, for which I think, India is a preferred destination for GCCs is the workforce and the talent that's available in the country. So what's your take on, both the upsides and possible risks as you sort of grow your footprint in the country in terms of the talent that we have locally and, available at hand? Shall we start with you this time? Because
yeah, sure. Done deal. I would say I think, still as I shared, before this discussion that we get to speak with a lot of GCCs or companies who are wanting to set up GCCs in India, across the world. There is a prediction by Economic Times, pitch for them too, that we'll have about 500 GCCs in next 3 to 5 years. So almost every Fortune 100 companies here, and if you look at Fortune 500 or bigger ones, like everybody's going to come here. So there is a ton of talent. And the good part that, even when I've started these different GCCs for different countries, what I would say is, the good part is, companies like, for example, Amex started a GCC back in 1999. Imagine it's a unsecured lending business. That's what Amex does, like gives you a credit card and it's unsecured lending. Their credit and fraud risk is the biggest two risks for running an unsecured lending business. The whole central risk management team was built here back in 1999. And so New York office, which is the headquarters, is more like marketing headquarters. Imagine like the company which operates in, it's $200 billion company, their COE for risk management is based here. So the good part is there's a ton of history and talent, like deep talent that exists. I think we had earlier in the session, like war for talent. There is that challenge. And the risk, associated risk, if I would say, of course, some of the regulatory risks that we talk about are always going to exist. But I think, a risk that I foresee is that the pace at which we're seeing innovation happening in US, for example, and if you go deep into like why are they able to innovate so much, every time people say, like even, our headquarters in Silicon Valley, it was amazing, like about 5-7 years ago, people were saying Silicon Valley is dead, no more, and then they come up with AI and they're leading the world on it, and like, billions and billions of dollars of investment. And I think like it's because they are building deep expertise in the topics that they go after. And I think even in GCC space, the risk I foresee is that if like even talent keeps moving around, they're not going to build deep expertise. You need generalists, but I think for the compounding to happen, for ideas to come which are so good, you do need deep expertise in areas.
So the difference between the delivery and the capability center.
Yes. Yeah. So that's where my hope is, that we see more experts going deep into their domain and GCCs then truly launching sort of industry first ideas from India. That I think would be, so I'm calling it out as a risk as well as an opportunity. That'll be my take.
So, your question was around talent, but I think it's also a question of India. And I think you were right that, for example, I was with Standard Chartered and we had our kind of own GCC model set up many years ago, and most banks do, and it's only going to grow. But I think somewhere we have to give credit to the place that we enjoy probably in the world today. You have a country that is, has the right social fabric, able to withstand something like COVID, right demographics, GDP at 7%, fairly stable currency. You have a government, you have political stability. So I think with all of that, and then you have a government that after a while is giving you the physical infrastructure which was missing. So whether it is, the Vande Bharat project or whether it is the Bharatmala, the Sagarmala project, the amount of infra spends that the government is doing, top that up with the digital infra spend that the government is doing, whether it is UPI, Aadhaar, OCN. So I think it's an attractive place right now. And, with the demographics that we have, so long as we are able to maintain the cost effectiveness and, slightly maybe selfishly, but that's where the currency component comes in. A large part of GCC business, whether it's transaction, every billing that you do has a currency component. If it's not hedged, it could impact you negatively. There's translational risk because you think you've had a great, fantastic year. 7 GCCs, when you tally it in the year, I don't know what rate the accountants will take, and if you have not hedged for translational risk, you have a problem. And finally, if you're not economically viable over time when the currency vagaries hit your business, it gets impacted. So I think, comprehensively, India's in the sweet spot right now, and hopefully talent part also plays.
So the cost versus cost, currency, availability of talent. Sorry.
I think for us, it's more towards the retention risk. It's very difficult to retain talent, and at times we hire 100 odd folks, and we get to know 70 of the later folks we hired have already left the organization. So that's one of the risks that GCCs face today across different industries that they work in, and around the compliance piece where we have to train the new guys that we hire, and make sure that when they come to production they are do things in the compliant way.
I'll probably end in interest of time as well on this with a very small anecdote. We were just talking outside and we were wondering, but a Gen Z had asked Amit a few days back that does the I in IBM, is it international or is it Indian? So what does the I stand for? So there's a lot of concentration risk as well. We were discussing like IBM is 60% here in India now. Deloitte is 30% in India. So while yes, acquisition, as you said, or training them up, or retention, as you said, or the cost of the talent is another thing, the GCCs are also being looked at a place that, is it too much in India? I think that's one risk which our parent organizations are looking at. Obviously, there are multiple things which could be done. We discussed around this risk mitigation in the first session itself of having offices in tier 2 cities. I'm forgetting the name of the cities, but Madurai, Visakhapatnam were places where HCL has now opened offices. So these are good BCP strategies, not concentration risk per se, but from a talent perspective, I foresee this as playing up in the next few years as well, with addition, as in obviously acquisition, training them up, retention, cost obviously remains there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anuja. So I think we are almost at the end of time. We'll just ask if there are any questions that anyone in the audience needs to ask or would like to ask. Okay, so what we'll do is maybe just one round of closing statements. We've got about 2 minutes, so if we can all take 30 seconds to just close out.
No, the very pertinent topic. I think this was like hopefully as the audience you also got some glimpse of a specific use case. I think there were previous conversations more kind of broader, and this we wanted to go deep into one specific topic, payments and related risk. So hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah, same here, and hopefully this was helpful. We were discussing around people, technology, and the debate where to stack that in the earlier discussion. I think wherever you stack it, just have compliance around it, because that's going to be very important.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think we are in a great spot. In India, with GCC's growth, it's a humongous opportunity for everyone who wants to grow in this particular space. So keeping fingers crossed.
I completely echo the sentiment. I think while we do have a Make in India plank and platform now, I think amongst the services sector, GCC is just growing head and shoulders above everything. So happy to be here and proud to be part of this event. Wish you guys all the best.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you all for your patience and listening to us. And enjoy the rest of the day.